Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. While we're trying to get Professor Kelders on the line, I will then continue with my presentation. So basically, I'd quickly like to talk to you guys about this new paradigm about flourishing at work. We've had a little bit of an indication today about what is flourishing and how we can kind of like approach this from a systems psychodynamic perspective. We had Manoku talk about what the impact of building flourishing societies have, and I want to give you a little bit of indication about some of the work that we've been doing regarding flourishing at work. So I'll quickly talk about three things, just to give you a brief indication about what flourishing is, what flourishing at work then entails, and then how we can go about developing flourishing within our organizational context. So let's first start with flourishing. Flourishing basically refers to a top-end basically refers to the top-end level of human happiness. It basically is a combination of hedonic perspectives, which means we're looking for pleasure and avoiding pain, and eudaimonic approaches, we're saying we're living in accordance with our own strengths and our own daemons. So Corey Keyes basically then went about constructing a new theory on human happiness, indicating that in order for us to flourish in life, we have to feel good, we have to function well, and we have to fit in. In other words, we have to have emotional well-being, psychological well-being, and social well-being. So, like I've indicated, the first component that Corey Keyes mentioned in his theory was that in order for a person to flourish in life, they need to feel good. In other words, they have to have emotional well-being. And emotional well-being is basically the construction of like having high levels of life satisfaction and having a balance between the positive and negative emotions that we experience in life. Secondly, he indicated that in order for us to then to flourish, we need to be able to function well at work. So we have to have high levels of psychological well-being. He indicated that in order for us to be psychologically well, we have to feel acceptance, we have to have a strive towards personal growth and development, we have to have meaning in our lives, we have to see the things that we're doing is contributing to larger society. We should be able to feel like we're mastering our environment, and we should be able to build positive relationships with people. We should also be able to have to do what we want, when we want, and how we want. In other words, we have to feel like we are autonomous at work or in life. Finally, we should be able to fit into our social environment. And he basically indicated that social well-being is the construction of feeling socially integrated. In other words, feeling that you're fitting in, accepted by your community or your society, feel like we're making a social contribution to the lives of others, and feeling like there's some other connection between ourselves and our contexts. So, as we know, why is flourishing important? We know that if you flourish, you're half as likely to be disabled, you live longer, you have healthy habits, you've got better relationships, lower blood pressure, especially in this heat, and you're able to tolerate more pain. So, taking this foundation theory, Professor Ian Rothman then went about and translated this into a model about flourishing at work. So what he basically argued was that flourishing refers to a state of positive work-related well-being or mental health, which is then categorized again by feeling good, functioning well, and fitting in at work. If that's the only thing that you guys remember after our presentation, I will love you for it. Okay, so in order for us to feel good, function well, and fit in, we have to kind of like figure out what are some of the attributing factors attached to it and what are some of the consequences. So, so as with Corey Keyes' original model, there are the three main components, right? But the antecedents relating to work-related context is a little bit different. So where we have in work-related context, we have job satisfaction and effect balance, where in the original context, we have life satisfaction, right? From a psychological well-being perspective, he integrated self-determination theory, where he basically argued that in order for us to be psychologically well at work, we have to have high levels of autonomy, feeling that we have high levels of competence and relatedness. We should be able to see that our work, the fourth component, connects to something larger, and we have to feel that we're making an active contribution. We have to feel like we're in a moment of flow, so engagement, and there should be a focus on lifelong continuous learning. And there should also be aspects relating to harmony. In other words, we have to build social well-being at work through creating opportunities for ourselves to connect better with our colleagues, to utilize the strengths of our team in order to really understand how we can kind of like build flourishing or flowing teams. So what are some of the determinants or antecedents of flourishing at work? So research has shown there are various contextual factors which like attributes to flourishing at work, the opportunity to control my work, the ability to be able to use certain skills, to have interpersonal contacts with people, to set very high goals for ourselves and being very demanding tasks, in order to have job variety, so doing the same thing over and over and over does not attribute to flourishing, but being able to have doing different things in different time stamps kind of like helps us in that perspective. To have physical and job security at work, which I think is really relevant to our specific context, and to have a valued position provides us with an opportunity to flourish at work. There are various job characteristics which has also been associated. So we know from the job demands and job resources model that high demands kind of like decreases flourishing, and job resources kind of like increases flourishing at work. We kind of like know that if there is a connection between the work that we do and the expectations that we have, that we will be able to flourish. In other words, if I know exactly what my manager expects of me, then I can kind of like attribute or channel my energy in that specific direction in order to help us to flourish at work. If there's a big fit between the person that I am and the work that I do, in other words, if I can live out my strengths at work, I'm more inclined to flourish. And we know that if I experience high levels of leader empowering behaviors, that it will help us to flourish. Social factors on the other end, if I've got good relationships with my supervisor, by the way, research has shown that you should have about 11 positives to 1 negative experience with your manager in order to flourish, which is exactly the same as you need with your wife. So your manager with your boss is just as important as your manager with your wife or your spouse, which is really interesting. We should have very good relationship with our peers. In other words, we should feel that there's high levels of psychological safety and psychological availability in order for us to build these positive relationships, and we should have high levels of trust. So, what are some of the consequences of flourishing at work then? So, Professor Rothman has done a number of studies on this, and he found that flourishing kind of has a direct impact on perceptions of general health, lower turnover intention, organizational commitment, and so on. On a team level, it is shown to be more, it stimulates more innovative work behavior. So if I flourish, it provides a bigger opportunity for us to engage in new activities. It helps us to put together better teams and to enhance team cohesion and to enhance further pro-social behaviors. On an organizational level, it has shown that if people flourish, they have lower levels of absenteeism and they perform a lot better. So finally then, how do we go about building, now that we know what flourishing is, what flourishing at work is, what the positive consequences of it are, how can we then go about developing this for our organizations? So firstly, we kind of like know from the work from Sonia Lubomirsky that there are 3 things that's very important here. So 50% of our level of flourishing, or happiness for that matter, is genetically imprinted. 10% of that is kind of environmentally focused, and 40% of that is kind of on our direct control. I can help you to kind of actualize the things that is under your direct control. And how do we do this? What type of interventions can we use? So our research has shown that you can kind of like structure organizational level interventions. In other words, basically structuring it from an organizational structure perspective to help people to flourish, so building a positive organizational culture, top-down approach, but that's very expensive. We can utilize self-administered intentional activities, which is kind of what Professor Kelders will talk about in a minute, but it's kind of like what can we do from our own perspectives to kind of like help us to build a flourishing workforce. We can do group-based development like training and development centers and leadership empowerment behavior, leadership development initiatives to kind of like help the group to function more effectively together. And we can kind of like utilize things like strengths-based coaching and strengths-based development. However, all of these things, organizational, group-based, and individual coaching and counseling, is extremely expensive. Therefore, we kind of have to think about what can you do as an employee to be able to help you to function more effectively at work and to flourish in your job. So remember this model. It's very important for us to structure our interventions around a validated empirical model so that we can kind of like know what route our energy should flow through in order for us to flourish. So based on this, myself and Professor Marius Stander had a couple of chapters talking about how do we then go about developing flourishing from this perspective. So in order to enhance emotional well-being at work, we kind of have to go about and express gratitude to our employees, but also to ourselves. We have to learn how to forgive mistakes, especially in our context. I think it's quite easy for us to kind of blame other people in order, to kind of like take the attention off ourselves. We have to avoid overthinking and social comparison. I think this is one of the major things that we kind of like do, especially in the South African context. We kind of compare ourselves consistently to other people in order to kind of like construct our impact or our contribution to the society or to the company. But we do contribute things, and we kind of like have to think about what is the things that we uniquely contribute and not necessarily what others do in relation to ourselves. We have to build and create development feedback loops where I'm in a safe environment where I can ask my manager and my colleagues to tell me what am I good at and what am I bad at. Not from a perspective to kind of like fix the things that I'm necessarily bad at, but kind of to help me to grow and develop from that perspective. We have to go into a focus where we kind of like learn from our mistakes, to evaluate the mistakes that we make, the failures that we have in order for us to constructively learn from it. And we have to express our positive experiences in written format. This is one of the techniques that they show us in positive psychology that has the most impact, is expressing yourself in written form, not just verbally, because that has more impact. How do we then build psychological well-being? It's important for us to have stretching goals. In other words, I really need to know where I need to be in 2 or 3 years, and I'm kind of deconstructing that goal into smaller steps to be able to help me to kind of like develop myself in that process. We have to show a willingness to ask for help. When you are suffering, don't suffer in silence. Put yourself out there, ask for help, because only then can you grow and develop. We have to seek out projects or jobs that are in line with our signature strengths, because research shows us that if I'm a creative person and I'm in a creative position, I'm going to flourish. But if I'm a creative person and I'm in an accounting position, well, let's just say people's bank accounts will flourish, but not necessarily you. We have to have multiple mentors available to us, not just one, in order for us to be able to flourish. I have mentors from statisticians right through to my personal growth and development, and I have to have these people readily available so that I can spend time with them and learn from them. So have multiple mentors. The final part then is, how do we then go about building positive relationships? And one of the things, for example, when I came to the Netherlands was really interesting for me. We've got this thing in South Africa where we say to everybody, hi, how are you? No, good, thank you, and you. And then you continue with your conversation. But in the Netherlands, the first time I got there, I went to a Spar, or their Albertine, and I asked the lady, like, just as part of kind of my daily ritual, I was like, hi, how are you? And she's like, oh, well, they're kind of like, they broke into my house last night, and it's so loud all of a sudden, and they're like building, and I'm like standing like, why is this woman telling me a whole life story, right? And I was like, oh, but I actually did ask her, so I kind of have to actually listen. And that kind of like reminded me to say, well, we have to have like these meaningful conversations with people where you can actually connect to people in a deeper way, especially at work. Not just going out and asking people, hi, how are they doing, but kind of like constructing our conversation in such a way that we can connect to each other in a deeper level. We have to use active listening, not just like what I do with Marius when we talk, just kind of like waiting for him to finish so I can kind of like just say the things that I'm thinking about, but we kind of have to listen to what they're saying, reflecting the emotion in order to show the person on the other side that you're actually understanding what they're saying. We have to practice kindness and generosity at work, doing things for other people without me necessarily wanting something in return. We have to share stories of personal successes, not just the ones of failure, to kind of like share in each other's joy. We have to praise not only achievements, but also failure. And we have to praise effort in order for us to feel like we're actually contributing. Because if we praise failure and we praise effort, we're cultivating a culture of performance, and we make it okay for us to fail. We have to build a network of expertise, knowing if I want to become an excellent researcher, but I'm not really good at writing statistical analysis or any of these things, but I'm excellent at establishing relationships, I must be able to draw these people in with the different skill sets that I need in order to help me to become a better researcher. So the larger your network, the more skills are available to you to draw from. And then finally, you have to act as a mentor for other people, because not only does that provide you with an opportunity to build better relationships with them, but it also helps you with an opportunity to contribute to something larger. Guys, thank you so much for your attention.